Okay, so I'm in my girlfriend's 2013 Nissan Altima, and it's due for emissions, okay? So I was gonna do it like last week or something like that. And the day before I was gonna take it in, we get a check engine light. The very first check engine light we ever get for this car. So what's the chances of that, right? Anyway, so we get a if I remember correctly, it was a P0101 mass airflow sensor, you know, circuit codes and things like that. So I made the call and I told her to buy a new mass airflow sensor, but we weren't gonna mess around with those cheap parts. So we paid, I think it was about $210 for a Nissan mass airflow sensor. It's been about a week since the part has been on the car, no check engine light, and I checked all of the emission monitors, and boom, there we go, sorted. We are taking a test drive in a Trailblazer. This is actually the Trailblazer that almost ran me over and killed me. For anyone who watches my Insta mechanic videos knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, customer complaint this time is there's like a loud rattling metal on metal sound coming from the rear of the vehicle, and it's mainly there whenever you hit bumps. He suspects it's like something in the rear brakes. Maybe this vehicle, I know there's disc brakes back there, but maybe it also has drum brakes integrated into the disc brake system, you know, for the emergency brake. Maybe the drum components inside of there are just rattling around. Not 100% sure yet, but I could definitely hear what he's talking about. Okay, so I'm underneath the Trailblazer. While I'm here, I'm just looking at the rear brakes because I did them not too long ago. So the brakes are looking very nice and even wear. That's what I like to see. But I found the cause of the problem that he's having. It has nothing to do with the brakes. It's actually the rear sway bar and the stabilizer links. If you could see that over there, let's see. All I'm doing is moving it from here. So as you can see, it's pretty bad. So need stabilizer links and the bushings for the sway bar. So with the wheel out of the way, we could see how much play we have here and all the noise it's causing. Oh, that just popped out right now. I can't make this stuff up. That's funny. What are the chances of this? Look at that. See what's going on here? Trying to get the nut off, and my socket just cracked. It's one of those 2-in-1, a 19 on one side, a 21mm on the other. And I don't know why it cracked. Maybe it's an 18mm and I was using slightly larger size. I don't know, but I'll take it off, see what's going on here. That's crazy. Okay, so I just tried my 18mm under and it does fit. So basically, I caused this failure right here using a 19mm on a 18, and when it finally starts to slip, you get too much pressure on the corners and just cracked it. So now I gotta buy another. So just one of those jobs where I gotta pull out the torch and the cutoff wheel. As you can see, we got the new bushings down there, new stabilizer link. Just have to go do the other side. Now everything's already taken apart. Just a matter of putting the new parts on that side. In theory, it's an easy job, but when crap doesn't want to come apart. I'm underneath that Trailblazer. I took it out for a test drive after doing the stabilizer bushings and links, and it sounds 10 times better. But I did notice a heat shield underneath here that was rattling. You know, so typical stuff here where around the fastener that holds the heat shield up, it just kind of rots away. So all I did was put a bigger washer on it, put a different nut on it, and it's holding up there nice and sturdy now. No more rattling heat shield. So after this, Trailblazer's all done. Sounds pretty good while driving it. No annoying sounds. Okay, so not too long ago I put a video out of the Trailblazer that had all that clunking noise coming from the rear sway bar. And the customer was saying it was coming from the rear brakes, it sounded like. So when I got back here and I just saw how destroyed this was, if you remember I showed the video on how bad all the sway bar links and bushings were. See that over there? Let's see. All I'm doing is moving it from here. But the noise was still there, so that really sucked. So he brought it back again, and yes, it is inside the rear drums. So that's the noise he was hearing. So I'm gonna get this noise taken care of, and of course free of charge, because although I fixed his problem with all that noise that was coming from the rear sway bar, it was technically a misdiagnosis, because this was the noise he was talking about. So no charge for labor here. So here we have a Silverado, and you can see what's going on with the brakes. So getting the rear brakes done on this one. It's funny because every time I see a Silverado, it reminds me of The Simpsons, that episode where Marge gets, I think it's a Silverado. It's so funny. I'm done with the brakes here, and it only took 3 trips to AutoZone. They got the parts wrong the first 2 times. So with Saturn SL2, the customer brought it over because he has to keep refilling his coolant reservoir. There's no big puddles underneath the car or anything like that. He said he checked the oil and the oil level was abnormally high. Okay, so he brought it over to take a look at it. I checked the oil myself. It looks perfectly normal to me. I don't see any signs of coolant mixing with oil or anything like that. I'm assuming he checked the dipstick while the car was running, or he didn't clean the dipstick off and reinsert it. What else? Let's see. So I just did some poking around, and there is one thing I found. So I'm using a mirror, and if you look inside of here, that right there is a cracked radiator. And just to show the oil level, went ahead cleaned it off and reinserted it. That looks pretty normal to me. It's right at the full mark. So he must have been checking the oil, I don't know, while the engine was running, because if you do that, it will be, you know, higher up, maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 1.5 inches higher or something like that. But this looks perfectly normal to me, and we definitely have a crack on this radiator. You can see it. It's obvious. So getting around to replacing the radiator on this Saturn SL2. And I got it out, but like with most jobs, there's always some sort of casualty. So that ended up snapping. The line itself was all rotted, and I knew it, before I even touched it, I knew it was going to break. So the nut itself started spinning, but it wouldn't spin on the pipe that it's sitting on, if that makes any sense. If you work on cars, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So as you can see, this part spins, but it wouldn't separate or break the bond that it had with the pipe that it's going around. So of course it snapped. But now that we have the radiator out, you can see that crack a little bit better. So it looks like I'm going to have to pick up a new line, and here goes the one that broke. So it goes right into the transmission. So I have to go pick up a new line. Okay, so I got the new radiator installed, and we also picked up a new line going to the lower side of the radiator. And unfortunately, But sometimes Dorman is the only one out there making a part that's readily available, so got no choice. And you know, sometimes customers just don't want to pay dealer prices, so it is what it is. It seems to be working. Okay, so we have another Cadillac here, and same thing like the last Cadillac that was here, just a blown out headlight. If I remember correctly, the bumper has to come off in order to remove the headlight, in order to change the light bulb. Okay, so it was pretty easy to get the headlight out. I did test the bulb, and the bulb is indeed blown out, so it's kind of what I expected. But it's just a matter of putting the new bulb in it, and this one is good to go. Cadillac is all set. Customers always love when you call them and tell them that the car was fixed so quickly and that they're actually going to get some of their money back because the job was just too easy. So I'm going to refund some of the money. So it's always good news for the customer, and they love to hear that. I'm in a 2005 Ford Focus, and we have a code, what is it, P0128. Coolant temperature below thermostat operating temperature or something like that. I checked the freeze frame, and when that code appeared, the car had been running for about 35 minutes and the coolant temperature reached about 150 degrees. So I just went ahead and changed the thermostat on the car. It's been on for about 10 minutes, and you could already see we're at about 190. So yeah, not too bad. Everything's working well now. Thermostat on this car looks like a pain in the butt initially, the 2.0 engine, but it wasn't too bad overall. Okay, yeah, so we got a 05 Accord, and the brakes on this thing are done for. What is this, a Chevy Malibu, I think? Came in for spark plugs, and the spark plugs that came out of it, the electrodes are worn down pretty bad. So I don't know if you know, if there was a complaint or anything like that, misfires, I don't know. I didn't feel anything when I brought it in. Maybe it's just I think for maintenance. But yep, so pretty simple stuff. Just about done here. Here we have a 2008 Chevy Aveo. Customer complaint is there was smoke coming from underneath the hood. They lost heat, and I think that's about it. Okay, so opening up the hood, you can see everything here looks kind of wet. I don't know how well it's picking up, but everything has like a fine mist. There's no more coolant inside of the reservoir, so just a visual inspection here. And I'm sorry, it's just very cold here. So I noticed this hose right here going to the heater core is completely ruptured. So I'd have to say this is the main problem right here. Okay, I'm all done with the Chevy Aveo. I have the new hose installed, and I just wanted to say something that separates one person from another. Okay, so the part they brought me is from AutoZone. So it said it was for this car, but more or less it's like a universal, you know, cut to fit part. It didn't really look like that. Okay, so I cut the initial chunk off of it to make it fit, and I had both ends connected. I had the clamps on it. It's ready to go. But then back here I noticed that the back of the intake manifold was actually touching the new hose I just put on. Now, if you don't give a crap, you would just leave it, and guess what? A year from now, or a few months from now, whatever, that's going to end up cutting through the new hose you just put on because it's going to be constantly rubbing on it. So I took it all apart and I trimmed it to fit perfectly, and now there's a gap between the intake manifold and that hose. We have a 2006 Chevy HHR. Now there's a few things I have to fix on this car, but one of them is this fender right here. So what happens is when you open the door hits the fender, and the door doesn't really open up all that way for the driver to get in. You can see where it's hitting. So what I'm going to do is pull the fender off, and we have to get all this sheet metal to come out. Now it's not going to look pretty, obviously the fender is no good, but the idea here is to get the metal to come out so that the door could open correctly. So that's one of the things I have to do. Should be fun. Okay, so here's where I'm at so far. We had a lot of hammer and dolly work to do, but the goal was achieved. If we open up the door, it no longer hits the fender and the door opens up all the way, as you can see. Now of course the fender looks ugly, but that wasn't the point of this. The point was to make the door functional, obviously. If you notice, the fender is a little bit proud or positive of the door, and that's all for number one, so everything can function how it should. Basically, you're going to see the door tuck into the fender, and that's how your door opens without hitting the actual fender. Another reason is wind noise. If your door was positive of the fender, let's just say this cavity right here acts as a parachute. So if it were positive, wind would go in there and create excessive wind noise while you're driving. So with the fender being positive like this, it lets the wind just go right past it.